The rain didn't care that I was breaking. It fell in sheets, soaking through my thin jacket as I stumbled down the cracked sidewalk of Brooklyn's edge. My heart beat louder than the city's roar. I was nobody Elias Kane, the Omega who'd been kicked out of his pack at 16. Too weak. Too wrong to belong. The world had taught me early that Omegas like Mescard. Quiet. With no lineage to boast were disposable. I'd spent 10 years scraping by, bouncing between shelters and dead-end jobs. My wolf buried so deep I barely felt its pulse. But tonight, something stirred in me. A reckless spark. As I slipped into the back alley of Howl, the city's most exclusive shifter club, chasing a rumor that could change everything. The bouncer, a hulking beta with a sneer, barely glanced at my fake ID before waving me in. Inside, the air thrummed with bass and the sharp scent of alpha pheromones. I kept my head down, my hoodie shielding my face, but my eyes scanned the crowd for him, Julian Voss, the coldest alpha in New York, the one they called Frost for his unyielding control and brutal efficiency. Rumor had it he was looking for an Omega to solidify his pack's power. And I, desperate and delusional, thought I could be that Omega. I wasn't here to seduce him. I wasn't naive enough to think a man like Julian, with his empire of steel and secrets, would glance twice at someone like me. But I'd overheard whispers in the diner where I washed dishes, whispers of a deal. A contract. A chance for an Omega to gain protection, status, even wealth. I didn't want his heart. I wanted his name. A shield to keep the world from chewing me up and spitting me out again. The club pulsed with energy, bodies swaying under neon lights. I edged toward the VIP section, where Julian was said to hold court. My palms sweated as I slipped past a group of betas, their laughter grating against my nerves. Then I saw him. Julian Voss leaned against a leather couch, his presence a quiet storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He exuded power in his tailored black suit. His icy blue eyes scanned the room, detached, calculating, like a predator deciding what to hunt. My wolf whimpered inside me, a mix of fear and something else, something dangerous and warm that I shoved down hard. I took a breath, straightened my spine, and stepped into his line of sight. "Mr. Voss," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I hear you're looking for an Omega." His gaze snapped to me, and the world tilted. Those eyes pinned me, stripping away my bravado, my scars, my everything. For a moment, I swore his wolf flickered behind his stare, primal and hungry. "And you think you're it?" His voice was low, smooth, but edged with a challenge that made my knees weak. "I know I'm not what you expect," I said, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "But I'm what you need." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched a ghost of a smirk. "Bold," he murmured. "Or stupid?" Before I could respond, a hand clamped onto my arm, yanking me back. "This one's trouble, boss," growled a beta from Julian's pack, his grip bruising. "Smells like a stray." Julian's eyes darkened, and a low, guttural sound rumbled from his chest. "Let him go, Marcus." The beta dropped my arm like it burned. Stepping back, Julian stood, his height towering over me, and leaned close enough that I felt the heat of his breath. "You've got 5 minutes to convince me. Stray. Don't waste my time." 5 minutes. My heart raced as I followed him to a private booth, the noise of the club fading behind us. I wasn't prepared for the way his scent pine and steel wrapped around me, making my wolf claw at my chest. Desperate to surface, I told him the truth, or as much of it as I dared, my life on the streets, my fight to survive, my willingness to be whatever he needed, partner, pawn, anything. I didn't beg. But my voice cracked when I said, I'm tired of being nobody. Julian listened, his expression unreadable, but his eyes never left mine. When I finished, he leaned back, fingers drumming on the table. You're broken, he said, not cruelly, but matter of fact. Why should I trust a broken Omega with my pack? Because I've got nothing to lose. I shot back, and everything to prove. He stared at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something soften in his gaze, something that made my breath catch. Then he stood, extending a hand. 1 month, he said. Prove you're worth it. Elias Kane. Or you're out. I took his hand, and the spark that shot through me wasn't just relief, it was something deeper. Something that scared me more than the streets ever had. The next morning, I woke in a guest room in Julian's penthouse. A sleek fortress of glass and steel overlooking Manhattan. The city sprawled below, a glittering promise of power I'd never touched before. Julian had laid out the terms the night before. I'd live here, train with his pack, and prove I could handle the scrutiny of being his Omega. If I failed, I'd be back on the streets. No second chances. His pack didn't make it easy. Marcus, the beta who'd grabbed me, led the charge, his sneers echoed by others who saw me as an outsider. Frost doesn't keep strays. He spat during my first training session. A brutal sparring match where I barely held my own. My wolf was rusty, weak from years of suppression, and every punch I took felt like a reminder of my place. But Julian watched. Not obvious lie was always working. Always commanding, but I caught his glances. Sharp and assessing. Once, when Marcus knocked me down and I struggled to stand, Julian stepped in, his voice cutting through the gym. Enough. He's mine to test, not yours. The word mine hit me like a shockwave. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was a claim. A line drawn in the sand. The pack backed off, and I pushed harder, training until my muscles screamed, determined to prove I wasn't just a stray. Days turned into weeks, and I began to see cracks in Julian's icy facade. Late one night, after a grueling day, I found him in the penthouse's library, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Why do you fight so hard? He asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. You could walk away. I hesitated, then told him about the night my pack abandoned me, how I'd run until my lungs burned, how I'd sworn never to be that helpless again. He didn't respond, but his fingers brushed mine as he handed me a glass, and the warmth of that touch lingered long after I left. By the end of the 3rd week, I wasn't just surviving, I was earning respect. Not from Marcus, who still hated me, but from others in the pack. I was faster, stronger, my wolf waking up in ways I hadn't felt in years. And Julian, he was different around me. Not softer, exactly, but present. He'd linger after training, ask questions about my past, share slivers of his own childhood in foster care, a rise to power built on sheer will. One night, as we stood on the penthouse balcony, the city lights painting his face in gold, he turned to me. You're not what I expected, Elias, he said, his voice low. You're more. My heart stuttered, but before I could speak, an alarm blared through the penthouse. Marcus burst in, his face pale. Rival pack, he said. They're coming for you, Frost, and they know about the stray. Julian's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw fun it for himself. But for me, the penthouse erupted into chaos. Julian barked orders, his pack moving like a well-oiled machine. But I felt the weight of their glances, some wary, some accusing. I was the weak link, the stray who'd brought trouble to their door. My wolf clawed at my chest, urging me to run. But I planted my feet. I'd spent too long running. They're from the Hudson pack. Marcus said, shoving a tablet at Julian. Grainy footage showed a group of shifters moving through the city, their eyes glowing in the dark. They've been sniffing around since you brought him in. His glare landed on me, heavy with blame. Julian's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at me. Secure the perimeter. Elias. With me. I followed him to his office, my pulse hammering. The room was all sharp angles and dark wood, a reflection of the man who owned it. He pulled up a map on a screen, marking rival territory. The Hudson Pack wants to challenge my claim, he said. His voice clipped. They think you're a liability. I'm not, I said, too quickly. His eyes flicked to me, searching, and I hated how much I wanted to prove myself to him. Then don't be, he said, handing me a comm device. You're on lookout. Rooftop. Now. The rooftop was a cold, windswept expanse, the city sprawling below like a battlefield. I crouched behind a vent, my senses sharp despite the fear gnawing at me. My wolf was awake now, stronger than it had been in years, but still no match for a full pack. I scanned the streets, my comm crackling with updates from Julian's team. Then I saw them shadows moving too fast, too deliberate, converging on the building. My breath caught as I relayed their positions, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Julian's response was immediate. Hold your ground. Elias. I'm coming. Minutes later, he was beside me, his presence a steady anchor. You're doing good, he said, his voice low, and the unexpected warmth in it made my chest ache. But there was no time for feelings. The Hudson Pack breached the perimeter, and the night exploded into violence. I fought harder than I ever had, my wolf surging forward, teeth and claws tearing through the chaos. Julian was a force of nature, his movements precise, lethal, but he never strayed far from me. When a rival alpha lunged for me, Julian was there, his growl vibrating through the air as he slammed the attacker down. Mine, he snarled, the word raw and possessive, and my heart stuttered even as I ducked another blow. We held them off, but not without cost. By the time the Hudson Pack retreated, the rooftop was littered with blood and debris, and I was shaking, my body bruised but unbroken. Julian grabbed my arm, pulling me close, his eyes scanning me for injuries. You okay? He asked, his voice rough. I nodded, breathless. You didn't have to protect me. His grip tightened, his gaze fierce. Yes, I did. The next few days were a blur of strategy and tension. The Hudson Pack's attack wasn't just a power play, it was a message. Julian's enemies saw me as his weakness, and they weren't wrong. I was still an Omega, still scarred, still fighting to prove I belonged. But Julian didn't push me away. If anything, he drew me closer, training me harder, trusting me with more. One evening, as we reviewed security footage in his office, he paused, his hand brushing mine. You fought like you belonged up there, he said, his voice quiet but intense. You're not just surviving anymore, Elias. You're thriving. I wanted to tell him how much that meant, how his belief in me was rewriting the story I'd told myself for years. But before I could, his phone buzzed, and his face darkened. They're planning another hit, he said, showing me a message from an informant. This time, they're coming for you. Fear coiled in my gut, but so did resolve. I wasn't the scared kid who'd been abandoned anymore. I was Elias Kane, and I'd fight for my place beside Julian, if he'd have me. We prepared for the next attack, but the waiting was worse than the fighting. Julian's pack was on edge, and I felt their resentment simmering. Marcus cornered me one night in the gym, his voice low and venomous. You're going to get us all killed, he said, Frost lost his edge because of you. I didn't flinch. Then help me make sure that doesn't happen, I said, meeting his glare. For the first time, he didn't argue, just walked away. Julian found me later. His expression unreadable. You're handling this better than I expected, he said, leaning against the gym wall. Most Omegas would have run by now. I'm not most Omegas, I said, and the ghost of a smile crossed his face. That night, we sat on the balcony again, the city quieter than usual. He told me about his past, how he'd built his pack from nothing, how every choice he made was to protect those who followed him. I told him about the nights I'd slept in alleys, dreaming of a life where I wasn't invisible. Our hands brushed, and this time, neither of us pulled away. When the second attack came, it was worse. The Hudson pack hit us at dawn. Their numbers doubled. Their strategy ruthless. Julian and I fought side by side, our wolves in sync. But they had a target. I was cornered, a massive alpha bearing down, when Julian threw himself between us, taking a claw to the shoulder that made him stagger. Elias, run, he roared. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I lunged, my wolf tearing into the alpha with a ferocity I didn't know I had. When it was over, Julian was bleeding, but alive, and the Hudson pack was gone for now. He grabbed me, his hands framing my face, his eyes wild. You could have died, he said, his voice breaking. So could you, I whispered, and something shifted between us, raw and undeniable. The hospital wing in Julian's building smelled of antiseptic and tension. He sat on the edge of a cot, his shoulder bandaged, his eyes locked on me as a medic checked my bruises. You're reckless, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only something softer, something that made my chest tight. You're one to talk, I shot back, wincing as the medic pressed too hard. Julian's lips twitched, and for a moment, the weight of the attack lifted, leaving only us. The pack was shaken, but the victory had shifted something. Marcus still glared, but others nodded to me in the halls, a grudging respect replacing their disdain. I wasn't just the stray anymore, I was the Omega who'd fought for their alpha, who'd held his ground. But the Hudson pack wasn't done, and we all knew it. Julian called a meeting that night, his voice steady despite the pain he hid. They'll come again, he said, addressing the pack. But we're stronger now. Elias proved that. Heads turned, and I felt the weight of their stares. But Julian's hand on my shoulder grounded me. He's one of us. The words hit harder than any punch. I'd spent my life on the outside. But here, with Julian's pack, I was starting to belong. Still, the threat loomed, and Julian pulled me aside after the meeting. They're targeting you to get to me, he said, his voice low. I can't let that happen. Then let me help, I said. I'm not running, Julian. Not from them, and not from you. His eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in the coldest alpha in the city. He stepped closer, his hand brushing my jaw. You make it hard to stay in control, he murmured, and my breath caught as he leaned in, his lips a whisper from mine. But the moment shattered when his phone buzzed with another warning. The Hudson pack was moving, faster than we'd expected. Julian's face hardened, and he was Frost again. All business. We end this tonight, he said, and I nodded, my heart pounding with fear and something fiercer love. Maybe, though I wasn't ready to name it. We tracked them to an abandoned warehouse in Queens, the air thick with the scent of rust and danger. Julian's plan was simple: hit them hard, show no weakness. But as we moved in, I felt a prickle of unease. Something was off. The ambush came fast. They'd lured us, splitting our forces. And suddenly I was alone. separated from Julian, surrounded by 3 Hudson alphas. My wolf roared, but I was outnumbered, my body screaming as claws raked across my side. I fought, but I was fading, the world blurring until Julian's growl shattered the air. He tore through them like a storm, his wolf massive, unstoppable. When the last alpha fell, he shifted back, bloodied and wild, and dropped to his knees beside me. "Elias," he said, his voice raw, his hands gentle as he checked my wounds. "Stay with me." I tried to speak, but pain stole my words. He lifted me, carrying me back to the pack, his voice a steady anchor as he barked orders. I drifted in and out, catching fragments, his hand in mine, his whispered apologies, the way his eyes never left me. When I woke, I was back in the penthouse, bandaged and sore but alive. Julian sat beside me, his face haggard, his hand still holding mine. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, his voice rough. "You scared me too," I said, managing a weak smile. "Guess we're even." He didn't laugh, just leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. "I can't lose you," he said, and the words broke something in me, something I'd kept locked away since I was 16. We didn't talk about it. Not yet. There was still a war to fight, a pack to protect. But in that moment, I knew I wasn't just his Omega, I was his. And he was mine, in ways neither of us had planned. The next week was a blur of recovery and planning. The Hudson pack had retreated, licking their wounds. But we knew they'd regroup. Julian was relentless, fortifying our defenses. But he was different with me now. He'd linger in doorways, watching me train, his touches lingering longer than necessary. One night, as we reviewed maps, he pulled me close, his lips brushing my temple. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. "Stronger than me. Maybe." I laughed, but my heart raced. "Don't get soft on me, Frost." He smirked, but his eyes were warm. Too late for that. The final battle came sooner than we expected. The Hudson pack struck at midnight. Bolder, more desperate. This time, we were ready. Julian and I fought as one, our wolves in sync, our bond unspoken but unbreakable. When the dust settled, the Hudson pack was broken, their alpha yielding to Julian's dominance. As the pack celebrated, Julian pulled me aside, his hand cupping my face. "You're mine," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And the possessiveness in his voice sent a shiver through me. "And I'm yours." The city was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that felt earned. We stood on the penthouse balcony, the skyline glittering like it was celebrating with us. Julian's arm was around me, his warmth steadying me against the cool September air. "You changed everything," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "I built this pack to survive. But you made it worth fighting for." I looked up at him, the man who'd once been a myth, now so real I could feel his heartbeat under my hand. "I was nobody," I said. "You made me someone." He shook his head, his eyes fierce. "You were always someone, Elias. I just helped you see it." The pack had changed too. Marcus, of all people, had pulled me aside earlier, his voice gruff but sincere. "You're not what I thought," he said. "You're good for him. For us." It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough. We weren't naive. The city was full of threats, and Julian's enemies would always circle. But we were stronger now, not just as a pack, but as us. Julian and I had forged something in the chaos: trust. Love. A bond that didn't need words to prove it. One evening, a month later, Julian took me to Howl, the club where it all began. The crowd parted for him, as always. But this time, I walked beside him, not behind. He led me to the center of the dance floor, the music slowing, and pulled me close. "I want the world to know," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "You're mine, Elias Kane, and I'm never letting you go." He kissed me then, in front of everyone, his lips fierce and unyielding, and the cheers that erupted felt like a victory. I wasn't the broken Omega anymore. I was his, and he was mine, and together, we were unstoppable. As we danced, the city lights blurring around us, I thought about the kid I'd been, the one who'd run from his pack, who'd thought he'd never belong. That kid was gone, replaced by someone who'd fought, who'd loved, who'd found a home in the coldest alpha's heart. The world would keep testing us, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because no matter what came, I knew Julian would be there, growling mine for all to hear, and I'd be right beside him, ready to fight, ready to love, ready to live.